Today we're going to go through the pattern for my Megaman energy tank tablet reader cozy. Now this is the one that I've already made, and I actually have my Kindle Fire in here. It's the original Kindle Fire, so it's almost a year old, but as you can tell, there's space at the top and on the sides, even though it is like pretty nice fit. So I know the new Kindle Fire HD is wider than the current Kindle, or the original Kindle Fire, so this will fit the new one, and it should fit most 7-inch tablets because the Kindle Fire has a 7-inch screen. So let's get started. We're going to start on the back of the cozy first, which is just the plain side. And to start that, start with black yarn and a size G hook. So put the yarn on the hook, and I'm following along with the pattern with you. So the first thing to do is to chain 21. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. Okay, so now I have 21 stitches. And since it's black, it's horrible to catch on camera to see where the stitches are, so sorry about that, but that's what the pattern calls for. And now I'm going to go into the second stitch from the hook and going to single crochet in that stitch and in each stitch across. So it's going to be 20 single crochets total. Now it's a little hard for me to see what I'm doing through my camera's viewfinder, especially with it being in the black yarn. Can't see the stitches on the viewfinder, and even though I can kind of feel the stitches, still we're getting to the end of the row. Probably about half of it done. I haven't been counting my stitches. But I really like this cozy because it keeps my Kindle from getting scratched up. And there's an option in the pattern where you can put a zipper in yours. I haven't done that to mine yet, but I do have the zipper that I can put in there if I want to. Now, I hide my tails as I go along. Some people like to put it in at the end of their project, but I like to hide it as I go along. So I'm going to tuck my tail up in front of my yarn tail, or my yarn end, and I'm going to chain one and then hold it on top of my work as I do my next row, which is another row of black, single crocheting all the way across. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. Now in this one, this last stitch we're changing the color on, so instead of working the full single crochet, we're only going to work half of it, and I'm going to snip my end off and get my turquoise, and I'm going to hold the two ends together and yarn over with the turquoise and finish that stitch off. So now you have the one row that's completely black, and the new row is starting with a turquoise chain. Now if you would finish off that stitch before, or with the black, without switching over to the turquoise, then you would have a black chain stitch on the side here, and that wouldn't look right. So now we're on row 3 and working our first row with the turquoise for the back of the cozy. I originally made this because I got my Kindle Fire and I wanted something to stick it in that kind of showed a little bit about me, and I love video games, and when I thought about making a little rectangular case, the Megaman energy tank just popped into my head, so that's what I made. Now we're chaining one and turning to work in the 4th row, which is another row of turquoise. And for those of you who are following along with the pattern, let me know if you like how the color of the font changes when the color that you're using changes. It might be a little more helpful when we get to the front side of the cozy. So let me know what you think about that. Now we're changing back to black So we're not going to finish this stitch with the turquoise. Now, if you don't like to work over your yarn ends, you can leave them just hanging there. I just hate weaving in yarn ends at the end of a project. I'll get to the very end of the project and I'm like, ugh, that is all I have left to do. Is weave in all of these yarn ends. So I do whatever I can to not have to weave in the yarn ends, because I can have a project sitting unfinished for forever just because of weaving in all those ends. Okay. There's 3 more. 2. And last one. Now this one there was only 1 row of black. So now I'm already switching back to the turquoise. Sorry if the work goes off screen a little bit sometimes. Whenever it does that, I'm looking around the camera to actually look at the work to see what I'm doing, because I'm finding it really hard to see it through the viewfinder sometimes. So this is row 6, and I'm just going to work in the turquoise until or through row 26. Now, this side is pretty boring, but it works up really fast because it doesn't have all the color changes that the front has in it. Now, if you want, you could make your energy tank cozy with 2 fronts and have the E on both sides if you want. I kind of like the fact that it's kind of looking at the back side of the energy tank, so I left mine blank on the back like the actual energy tanks are in the games. This is probably really boring, so I'm probably going to fast forward this and meet up with you at row 26. Okay, we're back, and I just finished row 26. Look how much it grew. Well, not really grew, but now I've already chained one and turned, so now we're going to work on row 27, which is our last row of turquoise. No. And I am really not liking this ball of turquoise that I got, because for some reason my hook keeps getting caught between the strands. Now that doesn't usually happen to me with the red heart yarn, so I don't know why it's doing that. But this is row 27. And last stitch. Don't finish the stitch. Clip off the yarn. Pick up the black. And now we're going to do the same thing on this end that we did on this end. So row 28 is a row of black, switching to turquoise again at the end. And I missed my tail on that stitch, so it's one of the bad things about the camera being between me and my work. Can't always tell what's going on or see what it's doing until after it does it. Okay, and last stitch. Don't finish the stitch. Clip off the yarn and pick up the turquoise again. And for those of you who don't know, this is a free pattern that I made, and there will be a link to download it off of Ravelry in the description box down below if you didn't already get the pattern from Ravelry. The pattern is a PDF file, so you'll need Adobe Reader at least to be able to open it, which is a free download on that as well. Okay. Now row 30. And we are getting close to being done with one side of our project. One thing I thought about doing to this, but with making the project, I decided against. Let's see. Is putting a liner into this, because even though there's holes between the stitches, nothing's going to fall through there unless you're going to be using this for some sort of like a pencil pouch or something. Switching to black. But also, I don't want to put a liner in this, because if you put a liner in it, it might actually make it too small for what you're wanting to put in it. And even though my case has a lot of room, so I could probably put a liner in it, I didn't want to put the option of a liner into the pattern, because for some electronic tablets or readers, it might make it too small, and if you're wanting to make this as a gift for somebody, you don't want to put that liner in there if it's going to make the case too small for them to use it. And we're on row 31, about halfway through row 31. And we're getting on our last row. Back in those black on black stitches, you can't see what you're doing. So you probably want to make this in a pretty well lit room. I hate working with black yarn in a dimly lit room, because it's really hard to see where your stitches are to go into them. And I can't even see where my stitches are on the camera. So I'm doing this all by feel. Okay, and last stitch. And we just fasten this off. Now, I'm not sewing anything with this, so I'm not leaving a really long tail, just a couple inches. Now, as you can tell, the black yarn is a little thicker than the turquoise. And it's not a huge deal because the yarn's all stretchy. But there you have it as the back of our cozy, and I'll get back with you when we start on the front. Okay, now we're starting on the front of the energy tank case, the side with the E on it. And if you notice, the first 9 rows are actually the same as the first 9 rows on the back of the case. So we're going to start just how we did before. With making the loop and chaining 21. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. Okay, 21 chain. And in the second chain from the hook, work single crochet into each stitch across. This will give us 20 stitches for each row. I made my chains a little tight, so they're a little hard to get into. You prevent that from happening by either using a larger hook to do your starting chain, or just by chaining a little slower and watching how you're making your stitches. So that you don't tighten it too much. Stitch, chain 1 and turn, and row 2 is also a row of black, and since I'm not going into the chain, this is going a lot faster, which is really nice. And getting to the end of the row, last stitch, don't complete the stitch. Fasten off, leaving a little bit of a tail. And pick up turquoise, hold the ends together and pull through, chain one, and working over the yarn if you want to. Work your next row in turquoise. What I like to do after I get a few stitches, just gently pull on the strands a little bit to make sure that it's nice and tight at the beginning so you don't have a funky loop or anything at the beginning of your row. Getting to the end of row 3. And row 4. It's another row of turquoise. And I skipped through the main body of the back just because it was like 20 rows of the same color. And I thought it would be extremely boring. But don't worry, on the front, you're not skipping any of the steps. We're going all the way through it together. So end of row 4, fasten off with the tail, and attach black again. And as I said on the back, when we were working on the back, I'm actually looking at the pattern as I'm doing it with you guys. So we are in this together. And we fasten off on row 5, pick up turquoise again, and row 6. Chain 1 and turn. And rows 6 through 9 are all turquoise, so we're doing row 6 now. And while I'm doing this, I'm gonna ask you guys if You can leave comments saying if you liked the video or tutorial, if you'd like to see a certain kind of tutorial, or if you'd like to see a certain kind of pattern maybe. Now this is one of my very few free patterns that I'm offering, so don't expect, if you ask for a certain pattern, that it'll end up being a free one, because most patterns are really complicated and they take a lot of time and effort, and I don't really like, I was pretty against offering my patterns to begin with, but decided to try to put some out there. So maybe if somebody couldn't afford to get a plushie or something, that they would at least be able to make their own. Okay, so now we're going into row 9, and at the end of this row we're going to start our pattern rows. So we're going to have to actually pay attention to what we're doing with our stitches in each row instead of just crocheting from one side to the other. Okay, chain 1 and turn. And I am going to scroll down on my pattern off to the side here. And if you don't believe that I'm doing this with you, there's laptop, there's pattern. And it's just right off to the side. So, row 10. We've chained 1 and turned. So now we're single crocheting in the first 4 stitches. 2, 3, and in the 4th stitch you don't finish the stitch. And this time we're not fastening off our colors, because whenever we go to the next row, the color is going to be right where we need it. So I'm just going to attach the black, and then we're going to do 12 stitches in black. There's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12th stitch. Again, don't finish the stitch. Now we're going to take another strand, separate strand of turquoise, and attach that. For 4 stitches. Now there's a couple different things you can do whenever you have a strand hanging out the end here. You can wait until you do your edging, You can just do it down with your edging. You can weave it into another row, or you can pull it up under your yarn whenever you do your yarn over for your chain, and chain 1, and then when we start row 11, hold the rest of the end under your stitches for row 11. This is row 11. It is the same as row 10. 4, and then again we don't finish that stitch. We're just going to bring black yarn up and behind the hook, yarn over and through, and then work our 12 stitches. And this is just one of the ways that you can run your colors whenever you're doing color changes on a pattern like this. This is just the way that I like to do it. I don't like running my colors under the stitches, especially when you have a big block of color in between the two different colors, because if you did strand it under the stitches, then you would end up with being able to see a little blue stripe through the black, and we don't want that. We want it to be nice and clean and just black. So now we got to the end of the 12 black stitches. Again, take the yarn behind the hook, yarn it over to the front and pull through, and then do your 4 single crochets at the end of this row. Chain 1 and turn, and row 12 is again the same as rows 10 and 11. So 4 stitches, but you don't finish the 4th stitch all the way. Yarn behind the hook, yarn over, pull through, and 12 stitches in black. And there's 10, 11, and 12th stitch. You just pull up a loop. You don't do the whole stitch. Whoa! Hit my camera. Okay, behind the hook, yarn over, pull through, and 4 stitches at the end of this row. So now we've done our first leg of the E. So now we're going to chain 1 and turn, and we're going to do 4 stitches in turquoise, and in the 4th stitch we're going to switch to black, and 3 stitches in black. Now there's a few different ways that you can do this. I'm going to strand my yarn over because I'm going to end up going over it with blue stitches, but you can just fasten this off with a bit of a tail and then bring the yarn over to where you want it. Now I'm going to yarn over and pull through, and now that I have the stitch completed, I'm going to stretch the piece to get the yarn stretched out to where I want it, because you don't want it too tight if you do it this way. That's one of the reasons why you might want to fasten it off and start the piece over, or start the strand over on this side. But we're going to just drag the strand over to the stitch, make sure the yarn is nice and not really loose, but just that it lays comfortably on top of the black stitches without stretching or bowing the piece. So now we're going to do 13 stitches in turquoise. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. And as you saw, I worked my stitches over that piece of yarn, so now you don't even see it. And I'm getting a little tangled up, so I'm going to try to untwist this a little bit. So now we're going to chain 1 and turn. And row 14, we pretty much do what we did on the first row, but backwards. So we're going to do 13 turquoise, 3, 4, 5, 6. And you don't really even have to count on these if you counted the first time, because all you're doing is a turquoise stitch in each of the previous turquoise stitches. Now switching to black, 3 stitches in black, and don't finish that stitch, I almost finished it. And switch to turquoise again, and 4 stitches in turquoise. Chain 1 and turn. And now we're on row 15. So now we're going to do 4 more. It's the exact same as row 13 was. 4 turquoise, 3 black, and then 13 turquoise. And chain 1 and turn, and there's our first gap between the legs of me. Whoa. Okay, trying to adjust my sitting. I'm sitting cross-legged on the floor, and I have a funky, not really tripod that my camera's on, and I have to actually put my feet on it to keep it standing up, so I need some better equipment. Okay, so we did the space in between the first and second leg, and now we're on row 16, which is 8 stitches in turquoise. So let's do that. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Don't finish the 8th stitch. And I'm going to pick up the black and just drag it across to do the stitch, and make sure it's not too tight. And then we're doing 8 stitches in black. There's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, and then 4 stitches in turquoise. Chain 1 and turn, and you'll get to where you'll need to untangle your yarn periodically. As you see, my turquoise is all twisted. So twist it back to my ball of yarn. It's twisted because I'm taking from the inside and the outside of the skein. You can keep that from happening by having 2 separate balls of yarn. But I just have this teeny tiny little amount that I did turned into a center pull ball, which I might do a tutorial on at some point. But now we are on row 17, so we're going to do 4 turquoise stitches again, and switch to black. 8 black stitches, and again on these rows, once you get the first row, you don't really have to count your stitches on the other 2 rows, because all you're doing is 3 rows in the same design. And my camera is saying that my memory card is getting full, so row 17 is the row we just did, and I'm going to come back with you on row 18. Okay, and we're back for row 18 with a fresh memory card and possibly a different camera angle, so sorry about that. I'm going to chain 1 and turn, and row 18 is let's make sure that I have the right thing. Yes, so we're on row 18. And row 18, we're going to single crochet in the first 13 stitches with the turquoise. So the middle leg of the E is not quite as thick as the other legs. So 5, 6, 7, 8. I'm just going to work over the black yarn to get that where I want it. 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. Instead of finishing the stitch, we're picking up the black yarn. And 3 stitches in black and 4 stitches in turquoise. Again, you do not finish the last stitch before you change a color, because you want to finish the stitch with the new color that you're going to be using. Okay, that was row 18. As you can see, the E is coming along pretty nicely. And row 19, 4 in turquoise and 3 in black and then 13 in turquoise again. And we're almost done with row 19. And on row 20, I'm going to do 13 in turquoise again. And we're switching to black for another 3 stitches in black and 4 stitches in turquoise to finish off row 20. 3 and 4, chain 1 and turn. And I'm going to untangle my yarn a little bit. Okay. Now we're on row 21. So now we're doing 4 stitches in turquoise, change to black, and now we are doing 12 stitches in black. Here's 3, and again working, holding the turquoise yarn on top of the stitches. So 4, pull that down a little bit. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. Then pick up turquoise and the last 4 stitches in turquoise. Chain 1 and turn, and rows 22 and 23 are the same as what we just did. So 4 turquoise, 12 in black, and 10, 11, 12, switch turquoise again, and last 4 in turquoise. That is row 22, now 23. Same thing as last 2 rows were. 4 turquoise, switch to black, 12 black, and again, you don't really have to count on these because you're just working the black stitches and the black stitches and the turquoise stitches and the turquoise stitches, since it matches the row right before it. Finishing off with 4 turquoise stitches, chain 1 and turn. Now we are done with the E. So I like to get my strings out of the way to begin with. So we're going to clip with a bit of a tail on the black, and then we're going to clip with a bit of a tail on the far turquoise. And get these out of the way. So now we just have 1 strand to work with again. Now rows 24, we're just going to do turquoise all the way across. Now when you get to the black here, you can either work it under the stitches, or you can come back later with a yarn needle and hide it under stitches. I find it much easier and less time consuming, as I said before, to hide it as I go. And now we're to where the turquoise tail is, and I'm going to do the same thing that we did with the black tail. Hold it on top of the piece and stitch right over the tail. And take it up. And row 25 is just going straight across with the turquoise again. So we're going to carry the tail up to row 25 and stitch over the rest of the tail. And all the way across. Again, every row should have 20 stitches in it. And as long as you're working straight and not adding or skipping stitches, you don't really need to count when you're doing panels like this. Okay, chain 1, turn, and row 26 is another row of just going straight across. And checking something on my pattern because I think I did something strange to my pattern. Okay, and I'm going to pause here so I can try to figure out what's going on with the pattern, because I'm going to fix it before it gets too many people confused. Okay, nothing's wrong in the pattern, I just can't read it apparently while I'm working on this. So row 27 is also a row of turquoise, and when we get to the end of this row we're going to switch to black. And I got lost along the way and thought that I was on the wrong row because we only had 3 stitches up here, and there were, or 3 rows of blue up here, and there were supposed to be 4 down here. And I misread the pattern and thought that I'd messed up for the amount of rows, but no, I just didn't read row 27 right while I was looking at it off to the side. I actually had to turn the camera off and look at the pattern. Okay. So that just shows, don't get too far ahead of yourself or you'll get lost in any pattern, even the simple ones like this. So now we're going to switch to black. And start row 28, chain 1 and turn. And again, I'm working over the yarn ends. Oops. That one got all tangled around there. Okay, and at the end of this row, we are switching back to turquoise. So don't finish the stitch. Fasten off. Grab turquoise. And chain 1, and turn. So now we're on row 29. And working across the little tails. Working all the way across. And chain 1 and turn. We're staying with the turquoise, so another row of turquoise for row 30, all the way across. And we are almost there. And at the end of this row, we are going to pass it off again and switch to black for the last time. And chain 1, turn, work over the strands, and this is row 31. And as you can see, this side starts and ends the same way as the back did, but the middle has that big E on it for the energy tank that we left off the back. So now row 32, one more row of black. Now you can decide to put the E on both sides, or you can do what I did and just have a blank side for the back, whichever you prefer. I like having the blank side and the side with the E on it, so I know which side my screen is facing, so I don't mess my screen up. And the last stitch, finish the stitch off, and then fasten off and pull through. So now we have the front of the energy tank and the back of the energy tank, and I'll be back to show you how to trim it. Okay, now we are getting ready to sew the two pieces together, and we're going to do this by running a row of single crochets around the outside edges except for the top, because we want the top open so you can put whatever you want inside, so it'll make it a pouch. Now you want to lay your pieces out to where the tails are both on the same corner, because if the tail is up here on the E side, then for this to be the right side, for the back, the tail has to be on the same side. So now what we're going to do is we're going to put the wrong sides together. So we take the E, the front side, we flip over the back side, and then we put the front on top. So now the two tails are on opposite sides, so that this is the front of the front side, the right side of the front side, and this is the right side of the back side. And to work this row, we want the stitches to be facing the front. So we want to work with the front facing us. So what we're going to do is we're going to hold on to both pieces, and this is black stitches, so it's really hard to see what I'm doing. But you want to go in the first stitch on the front and in the first stitch on the back. And we're going to take our black yarn and pull up a loop, and then we're going to chain one, go back into both of those stitches, and work a single crochet. So now we're going to go in the second row, the front, back, and work another single crochet. Now you do this in each row of the piece. So with 32 rows, by the end of this side, you should have done 32 single crochets. And here, after I get past the tails, I will show you how to know what you're going into to keep your rows straight. So that way you know how to tell which row on the front matches the row on the back. Because if you don't keep track, you might get a little confused and you might end up either bunching the piece or making it crooked. And since it's supposed to be a flat rectangular piece, we don't want it crooked and we don't want it to be bunched at all. So now that I'm past the tails, I'll show you at the end of the rows what you're looking at and what you're going into. So now the next row that I have, this has 2 lines on it, and then the one below that has just a little bump. So this row is one of the rows that has the single crochet on the end of it, and this row has the chain one and turn on the end of it. So since we're working on opposite sides of the piece, whenever we have the two, which I wish my camera would focus, when we have the two lines on this one, we want to go into the corresponding bump on the other side. So finally focus, two lines on this side, bump on this side. That means this row goes straight across and will line up with this row when we put them together. So we only go into one bar whenever there's the two bars, and then we go into the little bump on the other side and just work your single crochet. Now in the next row, it's a bump on this row. It's a little hard to get into. And then the two lines on this one. So we're going to go under one of those lines and work our single crochet. Now working into the side of a piece is probably about the same difficulty as working into a starting chain. It's a little hard to get into the stitches, but I mean, it's not as easy to go into the stitches as when you're just doing rows or going into the top of another stitch. But it's no more difficult than going into a chain stitch. Okay, and we're getting close to the bottom. Now we're in the black stripe. And it might be a little hard to tell where the stitches are when you go through the color changes. But as long as you don't put more stitches than there are rows, it doesn't really matter too awful much. And instead of going into the last stitch, or the last row, we're actually going to go into the end of the beginning chain. So the first stitch in the beginning chain, and we're going to work 3 single crochets in that same stitch. And now we're going to work in the back side of the beginning chain and single crochet across the bottom. And we getting really close to having this finished. So it's probably a little more difficult to go into the back side of the chain than it is to go into the chain in the beginning. But maybe if you do a looser chain, it might be a little easier. Okay. And we're almost at the end of the bottom row. And in the last stitch, we're going to do the same thing as we did with the first stitch on the row. We're going to work 3 single crochets into this, and then we're not going to worry about the first row of black. We're going to go straight into that second row. And then single crochet along this side until we get back up to the top. Oops. Trying to just go under. Had it way up above the camera, trying to see that stitch to get in there. And now we're working our way across to the top. Just go under 1 bar of those stitches. Okay. And my legs are starting to fall asleep from sitting cross-legged on the floor. For so long, so this is going to be interesting once I get up. But we are about halfway to the top of the side. So again, you're making sure that the stitches you're going into along the sides don't look the same on the ends, because if they do, then something's not going to line up right. And just a few more stitches going into the black stripe. And the turquoise stripe. And then the last 2 stitches. Now in this last one, instead of trying to get into the stitch on the end of the row, just go into the stitches on the top of the row. And I totally just did a slip stitch instead of a single crochet, so let's actual single crochet. So now we're going to fasten it off, pull it out, and just weave it in the ends. I don't have my needle here, or I'd weave in the ends. So I will be right back. Okay, got my yarn needle. So now we're going to weave in these 2 strands of yarn, which, since I worked over all the other strands, there's only 2 strands in this entire piece that need to be woven in, and we're just going to hold those together, put it through the yarn needle, and pull it through the stitches. Stretch it a little bit and it hit those ends. So there you have it. Brand new reader case. You can take your reader or your little tablet and just slide it right inside. There's my little Kindle Fire. And you can even take a zipper and sew it into the top here, because you see all this space on the sides and all this space on the top. That's plenty of space to have a zipper sewn in, or even some maybe Velcro, but Velcro might end up scratching your reader screen after a while whenever you take it in and out. But there you have it. So let me know what you guys thought of the pattern, if the pattern was easy to follow. Let me know what you guys thought of the tutorial. If there's anything that you would like me to change, or if there is a tutorial you would like me to make, just let me know. I'll have a link to the pattern in the description box if you're coming here from YouTube. If you're coming here from Ravelry and you got the pattern already, then you already have the pattern. It's just a PDF file. And yep, so let me know what you guys think.